on in.
Lights on last time. It's dark here today.
Come on in. Rachel back there?
Yeah.
Rachel, why don't you go up and hit the master DC switch on top of the stairs? Get a little more light in here. Okay, guys, you're inside the 100-inch telescope dome now, and you're looking up at the telescope itself. This is the second most famous telescope on planet Earth. The most famous one, we admit, here at Mount Wilson, is in a little museum in Florence, Italy. It belonged to a guy named Galileo. And he was the first man to point a telescope at the night sky and discover a lot of very interesting things about our solar system. But after that, this is the telescope that put us in our place in the universe in 1929. The blue tube and the gray box that fits around it weigh 100 tons. And to move this telescope, they had to have special bearings to support that kind of weight. They couldn't use regular bearings like pillow block bearings and ball bearings. So down here, in this tub, and up there in the tub, is a big steel donut, like a float. And it's attached to all this mechanism. And it's floating in a bath of liquid mercury. This 100-ton telescope is floating on a film of mercury. So it's absolutely like a Swiss watch. If I were to take the clutch and declutch it, you could go over here with one hand and push this telescope right over. That's how finely balanced it is. That's what they did in 1917. Now, I want everybody to have a look at the mirror, because the mirror is pretty impressive. It was built in France. The glass was poured in France in 1914 and shipped across the Atlantic to New Jersey, and then over to New Orleans, and then by rail to Pasadena, where it was actually ground and polished to its current shape. The glass here is a solid piece of glass. It's 13 inches thick at the edge, and it weighs 9,050 pounds. And 9,050 pounds, I calculated one time, is about the weight of 2 to 2.5 full-grown rhinoceros. So that's pretty heavy piece of glass. And when you look at it, you'll see that there's a lot of bubbles in it. Because when they poured it, they didn't have a ladle big enough to do it all in one pour, that 9,000 pounds. And they didn't have an oven big enough to melt all that glass in the first place. So they had to do it in 3 separate pours, and between each pour, they got a lot of bubbles in there. And it's like a 3-layer cake. And it's green. The glass is green. Because the only glass they had available in 1914 when they made this, the technology was wine bottle glass. So come on and look at the wine bottle glass. Walk on by that hole there and look up and see that green glass. Wow. Beautiful green glass. The first 3 broke. They cracked when they were cooling them. Because this is the 4th attempt. And they didn't think this was going to work, so they actually had the French try 3 more times. And one time they built it, but it was only 8 inches thick and it wasn't thick enough. And the other 2, they failed. So the 8-inch thick one is still in France at their factory today. Pretty green glass. Got a lot of bubbles in it, though. Yeah.
Hi.
You say hi.
Hello.
Check it out.
Every 3 years, we have to take that mirror out of that telescope and strip all the old aluminum off and put new aluminum on them. When we have to do that, we all dread it. Because from the first wrench on until the last wrench off and we're ready to turn it back to the astronomers, it takes me and a crew of 6 guys working 14-hour days, 7 days to turn it around. It's a major, major deal. And we have to pull this mirror, we have to take unbolt this whole thing, move it over, pick the mirror actually out of this cell with a big crane behind us here, and lower it all the way to the ground floor with a special device that only squeezes the edges. There's nothing underneath to support it. Wow. It's like really intense when we do this. Because if that mirror were to break out of there, it would just fall to the ground and be like a fragment. I mean, there would be pieces everywhere. Plus, you'd be the person responsible for breaking the most historic piece of glass on the planet. So it's not a good thing. Now, if you were to come here as a visitor on any day, you could come in the visitors gallery, which is on the other side of these windows here. And you could look up and see the big telescope, but you couldn't get in here, for sure. And you push a button and you get an 8-minute narration by a guy named Hugh Downs. And you have to be a certain age to know who Hugh Downs is.
You down, Barbara Walters.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was an old news guy. He's on the board of trustees of this observatory. Nice old gentleman. And he tells you some things about this telescope, but he also tells you a couple of lies. And one of the lies is about this chair right here. Hugh Downs tells you in that narration that that is the chair that Edwin Hubble sat in to discover the expanding universe. Well, that's not true. The famous chair, the picture of Edwin Hubble up there at the eyepiece, he was sitting on a chair that looked like this, except that the ring here went like this instead of around. But we know this chair was here when Edwin Hubble was working in this observatory, so we're 100% confident his butt actually sat here.